India's veteran investor, stock market guru and the titan of the Lal Street, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, passed away on Sunday, the 14th of August, after suffering a cardiac arrest. In the last 3 decades, Jhunjhunwala, with his trading wit and investing sense, was a towering presence in the Indian stock markets. His larger-than-life persona, his outspokenness will be missed by not only those affiliated with the markets, but people from all walks of life. Jhunjhunwala's family and friends held a prayer meeting in Mumbai. Joining me now is somebody who has known Rakesh Jhunjhunwala for a good part of the last 30-plus years through the course of his entire career on the Lal Street. Ramesh Damani, such a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me here on this show. I know that this is a difficult moment for you as well, Ramesh, but you know, it takes me back to the show that you did with him when he turned 60 in 2020. And I remember so vividly when you introduced the show and you said, you know, joining me now is Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, nifty at 60. His eyes lit up. There was that twinkle in his eyes and that mischievous smile, Ramesh, and I remember that so vividly. And I remember you asking him to examine his life. And I want to flip that to you today, Ramesh. As you look back at his contribution, the depth and scale of his accomplishments, of what he's meant to the Lal Street and to perpetuating the equity culture in this country, what do you believe Rakesh Jhunjhunwala leaves behind as his legacy?
Yeah, thank you, Shireen. We just came through after a very beautiful ceremony, a Shraddhanjali honoring him, and under the requiem of the big bull of the BSE, we paid homage to one of the great voices in the Indian capital markets. But Shireen, our story really begins in the mid-1980s when 3 extraordinary individuals coalesced in the market around the same time. Mr. Rakesh Damani, Mr. Nimesh Shah and Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. And while the other two were very reticent, very private individuals, Rakesh was the voluble, the excitable one, and he captured the imagination of the Indian public. And he was in many ways, after Dhirubhai Ambani, the Pied Piper of Indian capital markets. And he, you know, I often jokingly tell my son that if you cut a vein of his, it'll probably read Tiranga instead of red blood. He was that bullish about India, and his contributions will continue. I think when Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore died, they said they wanted to build a monument or a statue for him, and then his son said, just look around you. Everywhere there's a monument to Lee Kuan Yew's work in Singapore. I feel similarly about Rakesh, whether he funded Ashoka University, whether he funded Akasa Airlines, or whether he backed so many unknown entrepreneurs to their success. The monuments in the financial world are all around us, and it's the best tribute we can give him, of course, is not only grief, but also show gratitude for all the work that he accomplished.
Absolutely. And speaking of the work that he accomplished, Ramesh, I want to go back again and just examine the legacy that he leaves behind. Here was a bureaucrat's son, a chartered accountant by education and by training, who had nothing to do with the stock markets. In fact, he repeated several times in several of the interviews that his family did not want him to join the stock markets, wanted him to have nothing to do with the markets, but yet he decided that this was the temple of capitalism and he had no choice but to pray at the altar of this temple. How do you explain this fascination, this undeniable romance that he had, Ramesh, with the markets?
Hard to say. I mean, you're absolutely right. In the 80s, the common folklore was that if you went into the stock market, you wouldn't get anyone to marry you. So he kind of broke the mold and decided he would do it anyway. And he always tells the story about how his father, when he decided to go to the stock market, said, go, but remember, never come back with your hands outstretched. You know, honor your word, fulfill your commitments. So he started on the journey of stock market, you know, with 5,000 rupees, as is commonly known, which at that time was a princely sum of $500. In that, over the next 35 years, he translated that to almost $4 billion or 30,000 crores. If you look at the compounding ratio, Shireen, that's almost 50% compounded in dollar terms. It is extraordinary. Other than Warren Buffett, he's the only man who's become a billionaire through stock market investing. That too in an emerging market, that too in dollar terms. So I think he kind of understood that the pie was far greater than what was present, and the Lal Street, from being a backwater and India from being a third world country, were on the cusp of great change. And as we've seen, as the Prime Minister said in his speech yesterday on Independence Day, that he aims in the next 25 years that India becomes a developed market. And I think Rakesh kind of saw that. And His insatiable curiosity led him for a career in capital markets.
Absolutely, and his insatiable love for India, as well as he told me several times over that he had an unbridled fascination and faith in the India story, and he believed that India would grow in double digits over the next 5 to 10 years. But I'd also like to welcome Hiren Ved, again somebody who's known Rakesh Jhunjhunwala for a good part of his life. Hiren, thanks very much for joining us again. I understand that these are difficult moments for both Ramesh and you. You've known him so closely. But, you know, Hiren, one of the interesting aspects of the legacy that Rakesh Jhunjhunwala leaves behind is his ability to switch between being a speculator or a trader and an investor. He enjoyed both and he played both to the hilt. In fact, I remember him telling Ramesh that the trading profits that he makes from speculation are perhaps far more exciting than the profits he makes by way of investing. You know, an unusual ability for somebody to be able to marry both these and do it with such ease.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, you either have great speculators or you have great investors, but I think he was one of those rare individuals, you know, who could literally compartmentalize trading and investment separately. As an investor, he held, you know, stocks for decades together, and we all know the stories about the titans and the Crissils of the world. But at the same time, he was always glued onto his screen. And you know, for him, every tick of the market was like the heartbeat, right? I mean, he understood the heartbeat of the markets extremely well. I've never seen anybody who's got a big call wrong, and I think his big picture thinking, I think his ability to call markets was unparalleled. And I think, you know, he was very unique in that he was a very successful trader. And obviously, we all know, you know, an equally successful long-term investor. And it's extremely difficult to find both these qualities in one individual, but that was Rakesh Jhunjhunwala for you.
Yes, absolutely, a consummate risk taker. And, you know, and that brings me to one of the interesting aspects of his investment philosophy and his trading journey was leveraging the power of leverage, Hiren. And he made no bones about it. He said that that is what he has used to be able to get from where he started to where he is today. Of course, with the guardrails saying that, look, you need to ensure that, like everything in life, even the leverage is measured. But, you know, I think that speaks for his investment and his trading style and philosophy.
Yeah, I think, you know, people don't understand, but I think, you know, leverage is the most sophisticated form. I think he understood risk. I think if you want to use leverage in stock market, the first thing you need to know is the 4-letter word risk and how to manage that. And I think that, you know, people think it's so easy to borrow money and speculate or invest, but it's really not that easy. And you know, until his last day, he used to always say that he was happy paying interest rather than keeping money in the bank. And he knew how to do that. He knew how to leverage. He knew how to manage his risk and positions. And I think over the life, whether he borrowed money from his brother or his friends, you know, or the bank, he never ever, you know, ever not keep his commitment. And I think that is what made him extremely special. He would take a loss. He would sell his investments if he had to make good or loss. But he always respected that leverage was never his money. It is a money that it was only a tool to progress and make more money. And I think, you know, he was one of those rare artists, I would say, who understood how to play with leverage.
Yes, and you know, to the point that you made about honoring his commitments, he often spoke about the fact that in 2002 he sold 25% of his portfolio to pay back and make good on his commitments. But you know, Ramesh, I want to address another one of his sort of trading and investment philosophies with you. And whenever one asked him that, you know, what is it that you look for, what is it that you assess or analyze or review before before you actually invest in a company or invest in a stock. And he was very clear, at a price, everything is investable. But at the same time, I think his investment philosophy had evolved over the years, where he was now looking much more closely at business models. How would you, or in your opinion, how have you seen his investment style change over the years?
I think when he started, he was more willing to bet on, more, let's say, B-grade promoters, for example, or perhaps try to devolve into better business models. But I think his breakout year was in 2003. As you mentioned, that he, of course, lost a lot of money when the Twin Towers collapsed. But he was so bullish on India at that time that he even wrote a piece in one of the pink papers calling it the coming bull market in India. And then his breakout was he not only called the bull market, but he also had three of the darling stocks at that time, Titan, Lupin, and Crisil. And I think that 2003 was the year that cemented his legend as one of the great investors out of India. And I think he learned that you can hold stocks for not even years, but decades perhaps. He still holds a very significant quantity of Titan, for example. And he learned the quality of a great business, the quality of compounding. So I think those came to him post-2003. Before that, he was a more, let me learn, let me get my feet wet, let's see what happens. Always willing to put his money on the table. But I think after 2003, he became a more disciplined investor.
Yes, a more disciplined investor after 2003. And, you speak about the India call, and Hiren, you talked about that as well. And on the 8th of August, when I last spoke with him, and I had no idea that this was going to be our last conversation, our last interview, he rang me on Sunday night saying, look, I want to talk. I want to talk about Akasa, and I want to talk about India at 75. And I said, sure, let's do it. We'll do it on closing bell. And that was the last interview that we did with him. And even in that interview, he was very clear. India has entered a golden period, and this is the best time to be making the India bet. And this takes me back, and Ramesh, I know that you were there in that room with us at the ITC, at the CNBC-TV18 Investment Summit, when he made that big call that we're on the cusp of the mother of all bull runs. And Hiren, I don't know if you remember that as well, but the India call, striking the manner in which he pursued it.
Yeah, I'll answer that first, Shirin. I think you can woke him up in the middle of the night. I've talked to him when he was in the hospital bed doing dialysis under pain, but he would still say he's bullish on India. And even a month ago, when I was visiting him in the hospital, he would tell me that, Ramesh, nobody has any idea what India is going to look like in 25 years from now. He had this unique ability to see beyond corners. He was a CA, he could have gone and stayed anywhere in the world, but he chose India as a conscious decision, because he truly believed that the tricolor would keep flying high.
Yes, Hiren, as I pointed out, pursued relentlessly the India story and the India call.
No, absolutely. I think while there have all along been skeptics about India, and obviously India's journey has not been smooth, but I think that he understood the big picture. He understood the underlying structural factors which makes India such a great opportunity. And I think that he could articulate it better than anybody else. I think, he was the biggest spokesperson of, of the bullish sentiment of India. And I think he did a big service to people, because people who couldn't see that far or had the vision, literally relied on his conviction to bet on India. And I think, he did a great service. He was the biggest brand ambassador of Indian growth story. And I think that the people and the investors of this country will never ever forget.
Yes, he clearly was one of the biggest brand ambassadors of the India story. And in that last interview that he did with me, his call was on public sector banks and hospitals. And, that is what he left us with. And, of course, with his belief in the India story. Hiren Ved and Ramesh Damani, thanks very much for joining us here as we pay tribute to the big bull and we examine the legacy that he leaves behind for the Indian capital markets. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute with more. India's veteran investor, the stock market guru and a titan on the Lal Street, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, no more. He passed away on Sunday, the 14th of August. Jhunjhunwala was suffering from many issues, including a kidney disease as well as a heart disease, and suffered a cardiac arrest early on Sunday morning. In the last 3 decades, Jhunjhunwala, with his trading wit and investing sixth sense, was a towering presence over the Indian stock markets. His larger-than-life persona and his outspokenness will be missed by not only those affiliated with the markets, but people from all walks of life. Jhunjhunwala's family and friends held a prayer meeting in Mumbai today. And reacting to Jhunjhunwala's demise, Deepak Parekh of HDFC said, and I quote, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala was a modern-day legend with the optimism that gave fillip to the Indian market trajectory. He was a strong proponent of Indian enterprise and the ensuing uptick of the India growth story. Through every media and personal interaction, he looked beyond immediacy of a crisis, confident of the resilience of the Indian business story. He believed in the caliber and innovativeness of the typical Indian entrepreneur, asserting always that India would not only meet all geopolitical challenges, but emerge as the frontrunner of the world economy. He was my friend, he was approachable, and he appreciated every kind gesture that renewed faith in humanity. He will be sorely missed. May his soul rest in peace. More reactions. Manish Chokhani of Enam Holdings. Rakesh Ji was an extremely astute and clear-headed investor and a perennial India bull. He was larger than life, kind and large-hearted. He will be missed by our entire community. My thoughts and prayers with Rekha Bhabi and the entire family. May his soul rest in peace. And here are other market veterans on the legacy of Rakesh Jhunjhunwala.
My friendship with Rakesh goes back a long time, to the mid-90s, if I recall correctly, when we used to hang out fairly often at this bar in, I think it was Marine Plaza, called Jeffries, which was a favorite watering hole for a lot of people in the financial markets after stock markets. And that time the stock markets were largely in South Bombay. So we used to hang out there, and obviously with Rakesh, you need to have a very, very strong liver to be able to match up to his capabilities, both in thinking and, of course, in drinking as well. And, it used to be quite a series of sessions.
Last time he called me, which was about a year ago when I had come on your channel, and I was, as always, saying that I don't like commodity sector and I don't like, I think, the auto sector, which I think he meant Tata Motor. He got upset and called me and said, Abe, and then he gave me some abuses, saying you will underperform if you don't come and understand from me why Tata Steel is a great company and Tata Motor is a great company and all that. So, all the years we have interacted, not very frequently, but every time I have learned something, and he has, at least from his side, always tried to say whatever is right, and generally been you can say a friendly guy, and if you can't call him a friend, but definitely very, very friendly to me all his life.
His demise is honestly a huge dent to me personally. I think it's a huge dent to, our markets and the investment community. And I think to India as a whole, I think we will miss him. He was somebody who really, it didn't matter who you are. I think he could cut across all age groups and honestly not care about your background or nothing, as long as you were willing to listen to him or discuss with him or debate with him. And so that's how it is. And he was actually one of the very few people who influenced my thought process initially, I mean, it was, of course, 90s when people like Buffett and Peter Lynch and all of that influenced the thought process. But I think later on, it was somebody from whom I actually learned a lot.
His passion for the market, too, I think is something that we have to acknowledge. I remember he said markets and cooking both have to be taught. And so for him, I think the market was always interesting because it was a lifelong learning process. And certainly that passion he communicated to many other people. But to my mind, the biggest legacy he leaves is that he brought a lot of credibility to the Indian capital market. And I say that because he came from a very humble background, and simple living was his hallmark. And so he placed a lot of emphasis on integrity in corporate governance and avoided any scandals. And so to my mind, that is the most important legacy, is really enhancing, increasing the credibility of the Indian stock market.
Peers, friends and investors paying their tributes to Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. I had the opportunity of speaking with Rakesh Jhunjhunwala on the 8th of August, and this turned out to be his last interview. And of course, as always, the big India bull, he remained till the very end.
I think India is going to enter a golden period. I see India growing at 10%. We are entering a golden age. I wish my fellow Indians were as optimistic as I am. I think they will grow at between 10 to 15%, I think, for the next 5 years. Or I think for eternal time. The growth in IT services is not going to stop regardless of recession in the world. And I must, thank Mr. Mukesh Ambani for the change he has brought about in India, because, the low cost of the communication, whether in voice or in data, is what has caused digitalization in this country. And we cannot thank Mr. Ambani more for the beautiful, for the low cost he has brought to digitalization and, to either voice and communication, both of. I feel very confident and comfortable. And I feel Akasa will be a very competitive airline. We are not a low-cost airline, we are a frugal airline. Those who can borrow are those who can lend. And they have great, public sector banks have great great power of gathering deposit. I'm very bullish on the hospital space also. Public sector banks and hospitals. I don't think it's a very good sector to invest because it constantly requires investment. The valuations are such that there is more downside risk than upside opportunity.
Well, the perennial India bull Rakesh Jhunjhunwala saying India has entered a golden period and he expects double-digit growth to continue for the next 5 to 10 years for the Indian economy. And of course, his last calls there on hospitals and public sector banks. Reactions continue to pour in from corporate India. Ratan Tata saying Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, who sadly passed away, will always be remembered for his acute understanding of the stock exchanges of India. He will also be remembered for his jovial personality, his kindness and his far-sightedness. My heartfelt condolences go out to his family, which has to share the burden of this great loss. Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran saying Rakesh Jhunjhunwala believed in India and the sheer potential of the country. This conviction led him to consistently make bold decisions throughout his life and career. He had tremendous regard for the Tata Group. His passing is an irreparable loss, and we extend our deep condolences to his family and his friends. Anand Mahendra saying, yes, he was an ace investor. Yes, he made millions. Yes, he was always optimistic. But my strongest memory will always be his unshakable patriotism, his unwavering belief in India. I wish he had made it to the 75th anniversary of our independence. Om Shanti, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. Well, we will take a break, but there's a lot more as we continue on this special broadcast remembering Rakesh Jhunjhunwala when we return.